Hey guys, it's Foxdrop here with a video that accompanies my new 3.10 solo queue jungle tier list. Now there's slightly different layout for this tier list. Now you can find the tier list on Cloth5 on this page here. The link to that will be in the description of this video, so you can check it out there. But the slight different layout for this one, which is slightly different to my 3.8 tier list. I had a look at the feedback which I got from that one, from that post, and I've tried to incorporate it into this post to hopefully make it the best tier list possible for you guys. So the slightly different layout is basically, well, it's kind of summarized here, but I've changed the tier list so that within each tier, so within tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, there's now an A and a B section. And the difference between A and B is very slim, like really minor, to the extent where some of the times it's probably just preference. Like if you see someone in tier 1B and you're like, oh, they're a really good jungler, they could be in tier 1A, I'm not going to argue with you, because that you could be putting a lot of those that are in tier B in tier A. Like they're very minor changes. Secondly, the different change is that I'm going to be doing there are written explanations in this tier list for every champion in tier 1, both A and B, and every champion in tier 2, and a handful of champions which I've highlighted in bold. So if you want to find those, what I suggest you do is you do a Control F just to find the find search on your page. So for example, Control F, let's see, I want to find out about Nunu, so go Control F, type in Nunu, you'll find him where he is on the tier list, and you'll find him in the explanations. And that's what I suggest you do, because I'm going to be honest, I work my balls off on this tier list. Look at all the explanations there are. These are not, I'm not breezing through explanations. These are good, solid, proper, decent explanations for every single champion in tier 1, every single champion in tier 2, and like I said, a handful outside of those two tiers. So if you want to know about a champion, there is a good explanation for those, which you can check out in the comments, which will be below the tier list itself. But I know this looks like a huge wall of text. You don't have to read every single explanation. That's up to you. All you need to look at is what is on here. Like, that's probably all you're interested in, is the tier list itself. I don't want to show you that just yet though, because I want to talk about that later. So basically the purposes of why I've changed the tier list, like I say, I've done it from the feedback which you gave me before. So thanks a lot if you did give me some feedback. But basically, I felt as though there wasn't enough tiers within the old format, just where it was tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, or whatever it was. I didn't feel as though there were enough tiers, and it meant as though it's kind of difficult. The more tiers you have, the more precise you can be, basically, but you don't want to... Also, the more tiers you have, then the more tricky it becomes to please everyone. And I'm not doing this to please people, but at the same time, I think people will enjoy it less if there are too many tiers. So that's why I've split individual tiers into two subcategories, two sub-tiers, A and B. And so that's pretty much why I did that. And the reason for the explanations is just for you guys. Like, if you want to know the explanations, then you can check it out. Like, you can read the explanations, you can see my thoughts and stuff like that. And I will be answering questions on this as well, but it saves me a lot of time if I just write out these preconceived, pre-written explanations. So it saves you time, it saves me time, and I think it just makes for a better article in general. Now, the very last thing I want to say before moving away from this, what's new, is that this sentence here that is in bold, please read this. Basically, if a champion... Right, it says here, please know that just because it's not in tier 1 doesn't mean that I'm saying it sucks. Tier 2 is for still very good junglers, and tier 3 is for junglers that are still good. And if you want to be playing... Basically, tier 3 is good in solo queue. If you played a tier 3 jungler 24/7, you'd still be able to do well in solo queue. That's my definition of tier 3. They're good junglers. You don't have to be saying, why is this guy in tier 3? I think he's really good. It's like, well, he's not. I'm not saying he's bad. Like, he's just not as good as the ones above him. And at the end of the day, these are my opinions. It's a tier list. It's my opinion. So, that's the introduction. I've also written in an explanation here to why a champion is being included into the tier. So what defines their tier. This was something which you wanted clarification for, as to why I was placing people in certain tiers. There is a list here telling you why they're placed in their tier. And there are several different points here. I could probably add a few. Some of them are kind of related to each other slightly. For example, their clear speed and their ability to counter jungle. That's kind of related, but at the same time, it's different enough that I have to take it into consideration. For example, someone like, let's see, someone like Nautilus is pretty good at clearing actually, but he's not very good at counter jungling. So even though they're related, it's not entirely the same thing. And these different categories, some are more important than others. And also within the category itself, there can be like, say for example, I say someone is good at dueling. So say Lee Sin is good at dueling, so that will work in his favor. But then you've got Shyvana, who is really good at dueling, so that works even more in her favor. And some people who are good in certain categories and who are bad in other categories, it kind of makes up for it if they're really good in a certain way. Like Shyvana is a perfect example. She has no CC, so her ganking is actually pretty atrocious. But she's so good at controlling the jungle, at counter jungling, at dueling people, that it kind of makes up for it a little bit. It doesn't make her great, but it makes her better than she would be than other junglers who have pretty crappy ganking potential. So, the actual tier list itself. Now, like I say, there's loads of explanations here, so I don't really want to repeat too much in this video because it'll just get too long. But I'll tell you the first two tiers. So for tier 1 in group A, I've got Nunu, Zac, Jarvan, Lee Sin, and Udyr. In tier 1B, I have Elise, Evelynn, Nautilus, Nocturne, and Master Yi. So they are like your elite junglers. Nunu in the previous tier list had his own tier, which was just elite because Nunu was dumb, stupid. Like he was just overboard last patch, but he's been toned down a little bit. I actually talk about the explanation. For example, I'll give you an example of the explanation which I've written. So I'll read out Nunu's explanation. And I do these for all the junglers in tier 1, all in tier 2, and the ones that are bolded. So, for Nunu, the reason why I put him in the position he's at, I'm just going to read it to you. So, the recent nerfs to Nunu didn't really change too much about him. His natural tankiness and his consume damage were brought down a peg, though it was Nunu's smite consume combo that was the problem, not just consumes damage itself. Everything that was overpowered about him still exists today. Surprisingly, at least for me, Nunu has fallen in power but still remains an extremely good pick and dangerous foe. The reason why Nunu is not as good as before is because people actually adapted to his cheesy playstyle and knew what Nunu was going to do even before the game had begun. And this surprised me because the three things that counter Nunu are typically vacant from solo queue, and that is awareness, communication, and effort. So that's an example of the kind of explanation which I'm giving to each placement. So if you're wondering why someone's in a particular place, you'll see why. Master Yi as well, the reason I put him, well, I'll read you Master Yi's description. Oh yeah, as well, I should mention as well, I've got videos. So if there's a champion in here which I've done a commentary on, and it's not too old, there are some which are kind of old, like even before the like Race and Wolf Spawn were moved up to 155, but they're still, if I feel they're still relevant, then I've put them in here. So there are a bunch of videos which you guys can watch as well, they're all commentaries. But anyway, so Master Yi, I want to find him because I'm sure a lot of you guys will be interested to see where he's at. So with Master Yi, patch 3.10 reworked Master Yi is extremely strong. The reason why I've put him in tier 1B as opposed to tier 1A, even though, as previously mentioned, the differences between those two tiers are minor to the extent that they can be interchanged with personal preference, is because of tentativeness. I personally think he is really strong right now, but I also know that I'm heavily biased because I was playing Yi before the rework and smashing people. The other people that I've consulted have not been so convinced, expressing the fact they believe his lack of teamfight utility and vulnerability to heavy CC leaves him kind of useless later on. As it stands, Yi has great clear speed, great counter jungling potential, that's a bit of a tongue twister, and great dueling power. However, he definitely doesn't bring as much to the table for teamfights as someone like Zac or Jarvan would. He relies on other people to engage and bait out enemy CC so he can swoop in and force shot the enemy carries. He can be very weak if he falls behind though, almost to the extent of uselessness. But he has unlimited late game potential, meaning you can split push, farm and become a huge force later on in the game. So that's my thoughts on Master Yi. Like I say, tentativeness put him in 1B because I personally think if you're good enough with him, you know how to play him, you know how to play him effectively, he can probably be in tier 1A. But yeah, so another thing, thinking about the people that are in tier 2, just because they're in tier 2 doesn't mean that they're that much worse than the ones in tier 1. So if you're, for example, you're maining you main Cho'Gath and Volibear, they're your favourite champions. Actually, Volibear is a good example because Trick2G plays Volibear, and he does really well on him. Same with Udyr. So you guys might be saying, why is Volibear in tier 2? He deserves to be in tier 1. And again, you can look at the explanations as to why I put him in tier 2. But more importantly, tier 2 is not bad. Like, yeah, Volibear is really good. Yeah, Trick is really good with him. You know, and so he dominates on him because Volley is a good champion. Just because he's in tier 1 doesn't mean he's a bad champion. And it's just he's not Udyr. Like, Udyr just has more stuff about him. That's the only differences between those two. And the differences between Volibear and people above him are minor. Pretty much quite minor anyway. And anyone in tier 2, if you're really good with them, you can play them to the effectiveness of a tier 1 jungler. That's how good the people are in tier 2. But how hard they are to actually play is something which I've taken into consideration, or how hard it is to kind of untap their fullest potential, if that makes sense. It's something which is taken into consideration. So if you're really good with something, then you'll probably play it to a higher standard than what I've listed it here. This is more of just a general list. And finally, the last thing I want to say as well is that within these two lists, there's no within these two lists. What am I even talking about? Within this tier list, there you go. I think that's the right word. Within this tier list, within the tiers themselves, within the subcategories, there is no order to the way I've labelled the champions. So basically, the first champion in tier 2B is not necessarily better than the last champion in tier 2B. They're all grouped. They're all similar skill levels. Or effectiveness levels. So it's not like I think Nunu is the first person listed in tier 1A. I'm not saying Nunu is the best jungler in the world, and Kennen is the last person listed in tier 4B. Not saying Kennen is the worst jungler in the world, although of course I haven't listed every single jungler because some of them I just don't feel as though I need to be listing. Now, if you do have more questions about the tier list, feel free to drop them in the comments in the article itself. And the comments in the YouTube comments. I'll try my best to get around to some of them, or as many as I can. Basically, I predict that I do get quite a lot, so if I don't get around to actually answering your specific question, then I do apologise. If they're questions like why is X not in this tier, then I'll probably only answer one of those questions. Specifically if it's a question which I'm going to get quite a lot. For example, last time I put Nasus in a questionable position and I had a lot of people complain about that, so I didn't answer every single one of them because I'd already answered previous people. So if you do have a question, I suggest you look at the descriptions, like the explanations at the bottom of this page. Like I say, just Control F the champion you want to find out about. If you can't find it there, then look in the comments. If I've not addressed it there either, then feel free to leave your own comment. And if I ignore you, then I'm not doing it on purpose, although I might be doing it on purpose if it's a question that someone's asked 10 times before. But like I say, I get a lot of comments, so it's a bit difficult for me to get around to all of them. But I will try my best to answer as many as possible to keep this as interactive as possible, this tier list. Now, last point is that this will be on Reddit as well, so you can go over there if you want to check out some of the opinions. I'll probably be a bit more active on Reddit. When it first goes up, provided it does well on there, so you'll be able to see it on there too, and you can ask me questions. I'll probably see it first. If you put it on Reddit, I'll probably see it. I'll get to it earlier than I would if you put it on Cloth5 or YouTube. But I'm not saying that you have to put your questions on Reddit, so don't worry about that. But anyway, so thank you for watching this video. Thank you for looking at my tier list. I hope you find it useful. And I put a lot of blood, sweat and tears into this one, so I do hope you appreciate it. I hope it goes down well anyway. But thanks a lot for checking it out. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on my Facebook and my Twitter, and follow my stream on Twitch as well. And if you're coming from Cloth5 and you don't watch my YouTube, then feel free to check out some of my other videos, and you can subscribe to me too if you want to do that. But thank you very much, guys, and enjoy the tier list, and I'll see you in my next video.